What's up, everybody? Going to be coming at you today with a tutorial on doing a grungy slash psychedelic lyric music video. Tutorial is going to be geared towards pretty much beginners or somebody who's maybe trying to make a video like this for the first time. And if you're experienced with making graphical videos like this, maybe you will pick up on some tricks or things that you've never thought of before. Okay, so I'm going to try to make it quick, but I'm trying to be as detailed as possible with some of the techniques that I used to get the look for the video. First of all, let's start with the intro. And basically what I had there for an asset was the band logo, which they sent me. We only had access to a picture that actually ended up having sort of like a white background. So what I did there was pretty much go in and just key that white out, which gave me the transparency. And, I just set that accordingly. Basically use the sample color function, and what that allows you to do is go in, and of course if I take the keyer off, you're going to end up with this white background. So use the keyer, and then basically you can select the white area, and that's going to allow you to get rid of that backdrop. So once I had that set up, and this is a recurring theme throughout doing one of these videos, to me, doing a video like this and making it interesting is all about kind of sort of creating a 3D effect. And obviously we're not doing any kind of technique to do anything that's literally 3D, like when you would go to a 3D movie. But the illusion that things are in the foreground and in the background, and that there's natural lighting or some kind of lighting effect going on, always kind of livens everything up. And it's a lot better than, just doing a flat, just sort of a flat looking lyric video. To me, it's more visually appealing. Okay. Second thing that I did in here was add some sort of credits in the beginning. My media logo, the band name, and then here you see the song title come in. And it's all sort of like this motion graphic kind of thing. This is all done with just automating each element. So what you do is you go in and you just set keyframes. You would set a keyframe for this title on your transform setting, and then as that goes through, you're pretty much going to go through frame by frame. If I kind of advance forward, and you would just, let's see if I can go in here and select this. So if I go to the video on this asset, and then I select the manipulation key here, then basically what you see is there's just a set of keyframes that follow along with us. So as we inch through the project here, you can see how it's going to move along these keyframes that are set. And it gives the effect as it's sort of like part of the clockwork of the main logo. And you just sort of repeat that process for your other titles as well. So that's pretty basic to set up. Again, what you would do is start at your first point that you wanted to go. And there you would, on your transform section, you would set a keyframe on position. You would click, and that's going to give you your first keyframe. And with Final Cut, that's pretty much going to it's going to record any change that you make after that fact. And especially if you go to the ending of your event here, where the title ends, and you set a keyframe there, Final Cut is then going to sort of fill in each change that you make based on the frame that you're on. So as you inch forward in the frames and scrub forward and make changes, Final Cut automatically creates a keyframe at that section. It's a really easy and just quick, no-nonsense way to just create motion within the elements of your video. Okay. As far as the spinning, the only change I had to make there was, if you see here, there's an anchor point at the center. This was actually a little bit off center of the image whenever I first imported it. So what I was able to do is go to the transform section. And if you see right here in the transform section, I actually offset the anchor point. And I offset it by 1 pixel on the x-axis and 19 pixels on the y-axis. And that actually got it centered in the middle of the image. And so whenever I modified the rotation setting here, it actually looked like it was spinning around a perfect center point. Before, it had this wobble. It was like a wobble look, which didn't, work with the effect that I was trying to get. Okay. Moving on to sort of the grungy aspect of the video, what I kind of went for was this sort of stenciled spray paint kind of look on the lyrics themselves. And what the elements that I really played with there was doing a drop shadow to kind of give a little more depth and, again, sort of try to give that 3D feel to some of the lyrics. I didn't do it on all. As you can see right here, this is almost just basically a dry, just a dry representation of that title. Now, what I did do globally was added what's called earthquake. And if you go under your effects, you go under all audio and video, and you can type in earthquake. If you're using another editor like Premiere or something like that, you probably have something similar. All of the effects that I use in this video are very stock native effects and tools to Final Cut. So in other words, this tutorial is based on the idea that I'm not using anything like I've purchased as far as like effects and things like that. What I do have is assets, a few assets that I purchased off of Video Hive, and we'll get into those later. So the earthquake effect just adds that kind of nice jiggle. I mean, it works nice with this music. It's kind of a loud, heavy song. So that's all done to taste. But as you can see, I'm scrubbing slow here, but you can see that there's just sort of this jitter that's automatic, and you can set it to taste and make it more dramatic or not using amount layers, and you can change the epicenter here. So that's all subjective, but it adds a nice liveliness to the actual lyric titles, and that. Now, as far as the motion that I'm doing here, it's the same process that I described before. You're grabbing that asset or that event, and you're sort of scrubbing frame by frame to add the kind of motion in that you want. Now, again, this is subjective, but what I will say is that a big thing I tried to focus on with this video is to sort of have what's called a parallax effect. So a good example of that would be right here in sort of a subtle way. My background, which is just a generator asset in Final Cut, your backgrounds are going to work if you have like a JPEG asset, but just make sure that the resolution of the image is crisp enough so that you can do some zooming and scaling without it just looking really fuzzy and just cheap, So for me, this works well because the generators had a relatively high resolution, so I could sort of zoom in and create that motion. And let me actually sort of show you how that works. Down here on the timeline, you can see that my keyframe is sort of just on this curve, and it's just a slow movement from left to right. And the way that I added that little extra thing that kind of like gives that background, not just this predictable feel, is to go in and on beat. For me, I did it on the beat of the drum. But right here in this section, once I had my overall slow movement, which starts here and scrubs all the way to here, at that time, I went in and cut out the sections where I wanted to have this little pump effect. Watch, when I scrub here, you see how there's this quick zoom in. And if I kind of scrub a little faster, you see how it almost punctuates. And that does a lot for sort of adding a nice randomness to the background. And again, all of this is just done to taste. It would depend on the beat of the music, just the overall vibe. If you have a smooth piece of music, then obviously you don't want to necessarily have a whole lot of jumping around, but then again, that's subjective too. I'm more focused on just kind of showing you guys just some of the little tricks you can do that's so quick, that adds a lot of life to the video. This section right here, and what I did through the rest of a lot of the video to sort of make those backgrounds less imagey, like flat image, is to just add a lighting effect. So in this section, it's just highlights, and you can always, go in and adjust your the setting, the speed, and all that. But if you notice when I scrub slowly, this just kind of adds a little bit of like almost like if somebody was passing a flashlight over the ground. And this is, to me, this is sort of like a cracky desert ground. It just, in context, it just adds that realistic life to the image, to where your eyes are fooled to really kind of make you feel like, well, I'm not just looking at an image of something. I'm looking at an image that's being affected by light. And that does a lot to sort of trick the eyes into seeing something that you're really not seeing. All right, here I use the drop shadows again. And again, like the parallax effect to me in this video it's all done to taste. You can definitely do a lot of automation with these same type of things. Me personally, I wanted to go in and sort of do the movements a little more custom. And again, there with a little jitter effect, it's nice because you can always either do that zoom in manually, or you can always sort of make a cut and just sort of like make a quick pulse on your actual asset part here. Okay, moving ahead, this was kind of a cool effect that I liked doing. The way you would do this, let me scrub a little faster so you can see how that effect ends up right there. Okay. What you would do here is create the same title and then double over itself, so you have two copies of the same title. And then what you can do with the top asset is do your keyframes again for the length of the asset, the event. And you can see the movement bar here. And also just change the opacity. And what I also did on the second section was to also utilize the drop shadow. You can see that it's a lot lighter. It's not as pronounced as the one on the more opaque, the brighter asset. But this just gives kind of a nice ghosty view, and it just gives that sense that the parts of the video are sort of more alive, and unpredictable, and it gives you a lot of creativity to just keep people interested in watching as well as listening and deciphering the lyrics. Here I did sort of a similar thing with the main logo. I dropped the opacity a little bit on that, just to kind of not distract as much from the lyrical section. And right here, you can see a good example of the background changing its zooming, as well as the lyrics in the foreground. So right there, you just really have sort of a sense of these things are moving around in like a real space, like a 3D space. Okay. Now for the psychedelic portion, actually, let me point this part out really quick. So right here, the way I did this effect, which is an effect where you seem to be zooming in like deeper and deeper into something right here. And the way that I did this is I just stacked my backgrounds in the timeline, and each successive background is just dropping its opacity. And they're all sort of zooming in from like 100% to just a deeper zoom in. But as the opacity drops, you sort of phase into the next one. And what I wanted to do was zoom in almost like you're sort of going into like a blood cell, just deeper and deeper into like human anatomy or something. And then right at the end, you kind of do this nice little zoom back out, and which takes you into the psychedelic section. So what I did there was just to take this the stacking section of the backgrounds, and what you can do is then render that down with no lyrics on top of it. So isolate just your backgrounds. Go in and create a range selection and just select the range that those backgrounds are on. And once you've done that, just export that separately. And once you've done that, it's so much easier to then go in and create this section, which is nothing more than the previous section of stacking, but I've reversed it and I've sped the time up. So you get this feeling of sort of zooming in slowly, and then you get sucked right back out really fast. And another little touch that I did there was on the last lyric there, as you can see right at the very tail end, it moves back out with the background. It's very subtle when you watch it real time. But again, these ideas are just all about connecting the different aspects of the video so that it's suggestive to the eye and it doesn't just look like you're just kind of creating this big messy jumble of backgrounds and lyrics and everything. You really want the events and the things that are the elements in the video to kind of work together. I mean, chaos is good, but with videos, it's really kind of a controlled chaos. Okay, so that takes you into the next part where you zoom out, and now you're just in this crazy psychedelic section. The music really shifts up here, and as that part plays out, there's a lot of things that I did here to create this effect. Now, one thing is just the basic layering on the background. Let's take a look at just the asset. So the asset itself looks like this. And this was an asset that I got off of Video Hive. Now, if you watch this play, actually, let me find just the pure, here it is. So this is just the pure asset. And now it's just playing in real time. Now, as you see it play like this, it looks really cool. The pacing on the music that I really found to work really well was to make this sort of have like a burst along with the timing of the drums and the music. So the way I achieved that is I ended up creating another project, which is sort of like just creating a separate section to just keep things more organized for me. But what I did is I went in here separately. Let me open up this aspect here. And what I did is created cuts and then modified the timing of that cut and lined it up with the drums so that then you end up with this very, let me actually mute the vocals here, or the music, so you can just watch so you can see how it sort of goes faster and slower. And that was just done by creating chops and speeding up the mosaic according to the timing of the music. Now, the other thing that I did to kind of dress this up is play with the color correction, and then I also added some glow and lighting. But if we go back to the finished product, language, if we go back here, you can see how there's this sort of this like, it looks so much more complex than just that dry asset. Well, along with having like some bloom transitions where you're just sort of getting this like light burst, which looks really great, by the way. What I did here is just double the background and create a copy on top. The opacity is lower, and I just changed the color correction, the lighting on it, and everything. And then just created a scale out. So it scales from 100% to like 400%. Creates the impression that there's just sort of this like sound wave coming at you along with the beat of the music. And it just added so much complexity to this and multi-layering that I really was happy with how this came out. And the second thing that I liked about this section was I was really questioning how to make the lyrics not look cheesy over this part. And so once I found a font that kind of looked okay to me, then what I did is I went in and keyed out the lyrics here so that they are see-through. And it really glues the lyrics to that background in a sense where it just feels like it's all one presentation, and the way that it fades in, and the way that it sort of expands with the outer edge of this part. It's my goal was to just create something that looked very cohesive while also being like very complex and kind of out of this world. So this looks, in my opinion, this looks quite interesting, but there's not a whole lot going on from an editing standpoint. The other aspect that I did is to go in and put that earthquake effect right on the beat of the drums. Let me switch back to that chorus section. And so what I did is zoom in here. You can see where here I overlaid the sort of expanding, trippy part where the opacity's down. And then it just sort of fades at the end. And that's what kind of lets it just fade off away as if it sort of passed through you. Okay. And this was also the part where I sort of compiled this part before I did the lyrical section. It was just so much easier to keep track of all the effects and everything I was doing. But right down here, you can see where there are these cuts. And all this is you can see on this first cut, there's a little bit of a jitter to the background. And then it's clean, and then the earthquake jitter. That was to sort of simulate the power of the kick drum as it hits on beat, boom, boom. And it glues the music to the visual so much. It's so subtle, but it glues the music to the visual here quite a bit better. I mean, it was a night and day difference when I added this effect. And it just really, really kind of gave a great glue to this whole section. Okay, so I know this is not a typical tutorial while I'm going through and just showing you every little click. But what I'm really trying to do is just sort of show the ideas behind this, because nothing I'm doing is terribly technical. It's just understanding the details that you want to accentuate and then going in there and sort of executing it. So when you're doing something like this, you really have to kind of have an idea of wanting to change the timing and speed parts up and slow it down, and don't feel so trapped to just the basic asset that you have. Like this is a really cool psychedelic background, but in and of itself, in my opinion, it wasn't enough to just sort of have it running in the background like on autopilot. I really love adding the vibrancy. So if you see here, I'm going to take this vibrancy off just so you can see the difference. It's just a little more flat. When I add it back in, you kind of get a nicer look to it. And when I take the highlights off, it loses that lighting that's sort of like moving and pulsing. And then finally, the earthquake is what sort of gave it that sense that you're experiencing this visual with the beat of the drum, with the pounding of the drums. And so that gives a really nice effect altogether. Okay, just wanted to go over some of the aspects of how I edited this together. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I hope it just gave you some ideas of how to make one of these. If you're in a band, maybe you could play around with making your own lyric video, and just have some fun with it. So I'm going to end it there. I just wanted to make this tutorial, give out some ideas. You can always check out my website, Rob Connell Media. I'll put a link in the description, and I'm going to be putting out more of these tutorials as I come out with some more of my short films that I'm finishing up. And I hope everybody has a great day, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.